It's so politics to me is really interesting because I don't try to focus in on one group. I try to look at essentially like their overall principles of what they're trying to accomplish. Like I'll like some acts or policies that the left has and some acts or policies that the right has. I generally look at things in a way of, are they trying to help people and be good throughout all of politics? But then you get into the issue of what that actually means and what might be helping some is not going to help others. So right now, all I'm going to say is the political environment currently is kind of a shit show.
Oh, it definitely is a shit show.
Like right off the bat, when I first saw everything happening at the Capitol, my first thought was like, Trump's going to be a scapegoat. Like they're just going to blame him as the one person that caused all this, and everyone else is just going to fall under the radar to like leading to this happening. Because obviously there had to be a lot of things that fell into place to make this happen. But as you can see, it's like Twitter shutting him down, Facebook shutting him down. All these things are falling into place where they can put a name and label on the issue that caused him. Be like, he's gone. Don't worry about it. And everyone's going to think it's all okay now, which it isn't.
Yeah, no, the society is still just as fucked as it was. And people gravitated to Trump because Trump told them that society was fucked. So I have also, by the way, I've switched my audio input for the stream from my, I put it from my microphone, so now it's just my laptop. So I'm not even fucking using this goddamn expensive fucking microphone that I put so much goddamn money into. But, yeah, so you can still hear me right now? Yeah, you can still hear me, and based on my thing, I can still hear me. So, all right, perfect. I'm just gonna do this then.
Yeah, I also want to say, like, my background has nothing to do with politics. I have no general information besides what I see on the news or anything besides that. I recently, like within this last year, started getting into just like watching the news, and mostly I focus in on CBSN, that's like the live news online, Fox News, CNN, and then I'll go to NPR at times just so I can like see all sides of things. And the biggest thing that I'm noticing is it's unbelievably opinionated, which pisses me off. One like great example of that is watching the first debate between Trump and Biden when it happened. Going to Fox News, all they were doing was talking about Joe Biden's stutter, which kind of pissed me off. It's like,
that's
okay,
not consequential at all to how well he'll be able to perform the duties of the presidency.
Exactly, not talking about his policies or his actions or what he wants to do, and then you flip over to the other side of things.
Oh yeah, and it's just Trump bad, Orange Man bad.
Yeah, it's just bashing his son and what he's doing, or bashing Trump not fully being understanding your politics, or talking about his facial expressions during the debate. It's like, okay, like there's nowhere
it's
you
a
can
lot
go
of theater. It's a lot of theater, not a lot of actual anything of substance. And I would argue that is one of my. I agree with that criticism of the current society. I think that it's just all a big screaming match. It's all just it's a false culture war is the words that I would put to it. That I think that all of it is just a big show that the real people in charge are putting on in order to distract us from what's actually happening behind the scenes.
Yeah, and it's funny because you can look at like how Trump's saying it's like, don't trust the media, and then that's the only one source that you can go to. So it's like, all right, I understand where Trump's side's coming from. It's like, we can't trust the media, but then you have people literally storming the Capitol building, and there's such a separation of like, you're giving someone's like, hey, you should be safe and like try to get all your information, to I'm gonna break down into the Capitol building and try to stand in the Senate building looking like Chewbacca,
right?
Because that's what I want to do. it's so hard to understand what's going on, and then it's also hard to debate it because you're trying to look at all sides of things, and then when it comes down to it, you have no idea what to trust or what to look at anymore.
Yeah. Well, I would argue that it's largely part of Noam Chomsky talks a lot about it. It's an idea called manufacturing consent. It's that the people who have the money, have the influence, have the power to set the narrative and to enforce what their version of the status quo is, those people will set a narrative that favors that status quo, favors their power, and they will use the media in order to get us to agree with them and agree with continuing their power.
Yeah. And see, I agree with that because it's understanding that like money is power as well as like to have power you want to make sure you succeed. So going back to like human basic need of someone wanting to have control over themselves, like obviously you don't want to live in a box, you want to live in a
Right.
nice house. Well, a nice house
Exactly.
that leads to a nice car and all this stuff. So that is there, and the biggest issue is just understanding how to stop and share that
Well, I'm
because
gonna be honest, I'd rather live in a nice commune with all of my closest friends and family and just vibe together. But that's just my dream.
yeah, and I enjoyed that dream because I'm thinking about like vibing like what we went through with college and just like the crazy shit we got into,
Oh
and that
my
was a lot
God.
of fun.
That was a lot of
And
fun.
just like being all together as one, great
Yeah.
times. But anyone outside of that, of like we had people that didn't enjoy what we did, so then your commune becomes smaller and smaller. It's like, okay, well, we need resources from commune C and D, and they don't agree that we're fucking eating dirt or some bullshit.
Well,
So it's
it's that you choose to mutually associate with the people that you want to mutually associate with. If you don't want to associate with someone, you don't have to.
yeah, but there comes a certain point where you have to talk to someone because they have something you want or you need.
Well, yeah.
So it's the whole reason that we trade with China because they're cheap and they're fast.
Yeah.
Like company I'm currently working for, we develop different types of product, and a lot of the stuff that we're developing is going to be coming from China because they manufacture things 10 times faster than anywhere in the US. And when you talk to them, they'll negotiate price. When you talk to someone in the US, they're like, it's made in the US, it's so much better. Like that's a whole nother debate if you want to get into made in the US bullshit.
I, I'm gonna be completely honest. There are some people in the circles that I participate with who would love to talk about China and would love to compare China to the US and then simp for China. And I don't want to do that. Like I
Well,
I
I'll leave you and your listeners with a little nugget of stuff that they can start looking into.
all right, all right.
Made in the U.S. Federal regulations essentially quantifies down to a few simple facts, and they are that you have it processed or changed within a manufacturing space in the United States, and that can come all the way down to the point of if I buy. Say I'm making trail mix and I buy all of my raw materials from China and it comes in and I add salt to it and put it in a bag, I can slap a made in the US sticker on it.
Oh shit.
Like there's a lot of documents and shit you have to fill out, yes, but that's what it comes down to. As long as you're changing a few different things, and then
As
you
long as
also
you're
have a
doing the
percentage.
final step, it counts.
Yeah, and you have to have a percentage of like we can't have salt. We can have salt manufactured in America, but there's certain herbs and spices that you can't have here, but they're still manufactured or made in America stuff that contains that. So there's
Huh.
percentages you have to follow. But if you start looking into it, you realize that federal regulation is uh, essentially like a multiple choice, just making sure you check all your boxes.
Okay.
It, it's insane, and like I said, not a debate for another time
Oh,
because just
definitely.
federal
And that's
compliance is
definitely
bullshit.
not my that's not my specific area of expertise.
Yeah, you're definitely more politics. I agree with that. It's politics is always interesting because it comes down to like thinking about someone studying politics. It's like you're just studying human
Right.
interaction and human results?
It's
You're a
well,
psychologist.
I look at society and I'm trying to figure out how to improve it. Because ultimately, I believe that the goal of society is to improve society, to make it better. And I then do what I can to improve the society with which I live in. And personally, I think that that means providing the basic human needs for those that reside in that society.
Yeah, it's so I think that's right, or I don't even know. So when I'm trying to think about human needs and human wants, because you can't have needs without wants, you can't quantify essentially what everyone needs and wants to the same value. And that's where things start getting really messy in politics of like, well, this person needs insulin to survive and this
Right.
person doesn't. So we have to charge them for it. But if we charge them for this, they're going to have less money. So their value goes down and this person's value stays the same. So how do we make them equal?
Well, it's more of the idea that, say, someone needs insulin to survive. If they don't have insulin, then they don't survive. I think that that makes insulin less of a commodity and more of a basic necessity. I
Okay.
don't like the idea that someone has the ability to raise the price of insulin to the point where people who need it to survive are unable to afford it and die. There's so many reports of people who can't afford insulin, are rationing insulin, and have to, they're trying to stretch it and they're dying because they can't afford insulin. Their insurance won't cover it. And I don't think that that's a situation that in a society that's supposed to help people should be happening. I think that insulin, I think we can afford to make insulin and make it cheap enough for everyone who needs it to be able to get it. Or if people can't afford it, to provide it to them.
Mm-hmm. And that becomes really interesting because you're qualifying what is a necessity. So you're assigning of like that label of it being a necessity for someone to survive, and I agree that that is there for insulin. But then you have to go through like every single little detail of what is necessity and what isn't, and then how do you price those out? Because insulin is going
Well,
to cost a lot different. Go
Well,
ahead.
yeah, I think there is a line of what is considered a necessity and what is considered more of a luxury. And I would think that that line could be very easily placed at if you need it to survive. Medicine is a necessity. If you have a pre existing condition, the treatment for that condition is a necessity. If you don't get it, your life sucks. Food, the bare minimum.
Right there. You said your life sucks, so that's you're defining survivability now. So what is considered survivable? So if I give someone a medicine, they're going to keep breathing, but they can't walk or do anything or leave their bed. But hell, they're surviving.
Well,
Like they're still alive.
let
So it's like,
me,
all right, so,
can I use a personal anecdote?
yeah,
That
go ahead.
I have Crohn's disease. You know this. My gut hates me. My stomach wants me to not be doing the things that I'm doing. And so I require a treatment once every uh, 2 months. And that treatment is really fucking expensive under the current healthcare system. Now, if I don't get that treatment every 2 months, I run the risk of having a major infection that has the potential to kill me. So I need that treatment, or I face extraordinarily severe consequences in my life. Now, I would prefer it to live in a world where people who have need for such treatments don't have to worry about facing bankruptcy in order to treat them.
Okay. And I understand that, and I think my thing is, so that is your necessity, and I agree
Right.
that that is a necessity for you to survive, because an infection that could kill you, death is the opposite of surviving. It's not
Right.
living. So, but it comes down to, say there's a medicine that would help you where you don't need that 2 month thing or procedure every 2 months. How much does that cost, and is that a necessity for you to have that medicine, or you could just do the
Hmm.
2 month thing? And
So if there
that
was if there was a cure, would that cure then become the necessity instead of the treatment?
exactly, and it's like, okay, well,
Hmm.
if you're taking away this procedure, you're taking away value dollars from the doctors, nurses, the manufacturers of the equipment, and say the equipment is so specific just for that procedure, you can run a whole business out of that,
Well, I
out of
would
everything.
argue that cures, under our current economic system, cures are very much less common than treatments. And that's because our economic system is based around profit. It is a lot easier to make money off of someone by charging them treatment, and their insurance company pays $10,000 every couple months or so, and you get to farm money off of them indefinitely. That's a lot more viable of a business strategy than selling a single cure once, and
Yeah,
then you don't get to make any more money off of them. I uh, So I would say that if a cure became possible, then why not? If we figured out how to cure a disease, why should we allow it to continue to harm the population if we've already figured out how to fix it?
because you can make a procedure that makes it livable, and that livable is profitable. So
Yeah,
if you can make it so
exactly.
that they can keep making money, and that's the reason DuPont, if you buy anything from DuPont, any corn or anything, you can't replant that corn because they genetically modified it,
Oh, yeah,
and not
exactly.
not GMOs. Like, I understand what GMOs are because anything you eat nowadays is GMOs, but
Right.
they genetically modified the DNA of that corn to live for
To be
one cycle.
sterile?
Yeah,
Yeah,
so it can't produce offspring, which means you have to keep buying from them. And
exactly.
they got so to the point where they had people go out and test corn from neighboring farms. And if it came up with their DNA sequence, they sued the shit out of the farm until they went out of business and bought the land and started producing again. Even though the farmers had no control over literally air blowing seeds onto their crops.
Right, exactly.
It's like, hell, these are now our corn that you're selling at a profit. That's illegal.
Welcome to capitalism, baby.
Yeah. And I think this was back in the 70s or 60s, whenever this was happening. I don't know. There's a lot more regulation,
Right.
legal boundaries to homegrown farmers. But it's also why, like, heirloom seeds cost way more than normal seeds, because you have seeds that are able to reproduce and make sure that they keep growing.
Right.
And obviously, we just got more into seed talk, I guess. But back into, like, people surviving and making it livable to make it profitable is a terrible
Well,
thing.
I just want to read what someone said in chat. They said that the cure is to let you die and not breed that bad gene into the society you want to make better. Well, I guess that is a very interesting idea of survival of the fittest, which is something that it makes sense for animals, but I believe that we decided to create a society to make it so those people have a chance at life and don't just die out. I don't think that we should let people just die out over some claimed inferior genes. I think
So
that all people are capable of benefiting and contributing to the society that we live in. And I would like to enable everyone to get to the point where they are capable of contributing positively to the society in which we live.
yeah, and that's a really cool rabbit hole that we can go down with modern Darwinism.
Oh, yeah.
Darwinism, obviously, the strongest survive, but what happens when people are the one that is controlling the factors. So we're choosing, essentially, think about like uh town lines, how they were drawn around specific um effluent and I'm trying to think of the word.
Uh,
People's salary.
socioeconomic
Yeah.
status.
Yes, exactly. So these were drawn around these different towns, and then obviously towns do more poorly or better. Like the state I live in is significantly lower on the line for education
Right.
than almost any other state. Like we're in the bottom 40 guys, or bottom 10 out of the 50 states. And that is because when everything was happening during and after the Civil War, they didn't want to keep sending money down that way because in the South, people were like, you guys did bad. Now we're going to punish you for it. And over the years, it just slowly developed where the money coming into here was vacation money and not people sticking around. So we have no money
Right.
for any type of education. Um, but that modern Darwinism is because people decided that they wanted to live better and didn't really understand or maybe care. Maybe they knew what they were doing, but they didn't want to go help someone else. And not helping someone
Right.
else made that person less off, and then their offspring even less off. And it's that whole like, I'm gonna get out of Compton and like, work my way up, and I have to work so much harder than everyone else. By the time you get to the top, you either don't realize or don't care about the people you stepped on, and you're just going through that cycle.
Exactly. Exactly. I don't think I could have said it better.
well, well, in the thing the commenter said about that, like choosing, essentially allowing someone to die because their genes are inferior, it's going back to prehistoric Darwinism or whatever original
Right.
Darwinism was, like strongest of the fittest. It's like,
Which
okay,
so there's a difference. I read a little bit of a book. It's called Mutual Aid, and it was written by a guy named Peter Kropotkin, and I happen to really like it. And he was a big fan of Darwin. He read through The Survival of the Species. Darwin, if you didn't know this, was really scared when he initially was writing Survival of the Species because he felt it contradicted the mainstream economic worldview of the time of societies being rife with conflict and everyone conflicting and struggling to try to survive, every man for himself. And that's not what happened. What Darwin found when he studied numberless groups of animals is that as the number increased, that animals, groups of animals would, of the same species at least, would stop competing and instead would cooperate. They would contribute to the group and they would try to do everything they could in order to help the group, because if they help the group helps them. It's a very easy to understand idea, and it's the basics of society and of forming communities of people that help each other.
and that's really interesting because I didn't know about that end part of Darwinism. Like I all I know about modern Darwinism is what I learned in grade school. But
Exactly.
uh,
That's all anyone knows about it.
yeah, so that's interesting. The end part of where they saw essentially species evolving together, which is similar how humans like evolve. Like we have domesticated animals now, which is kind of species interminglation and slavery of other species. But besides the point, um, what I'm looking at with that statement that you said, the species working together, all I can think about is, all right, what would happen if you isolated them into a box of everything they needed was in this box and there was no outside influence? Would there be a point at which their future generations annihilated each other, similar to what's happening with the humans? Like,
Well, that
yes,
is a very interesting idea, and it reminds me of an experiment that I've actually read a decent little bit about. It was called Mouse Utopia. There was an experiment to do exactly that, but for mice. The problem was they thought about basic needs very, very basically. Like, they gave the mice food, water, and drugs. They gave that and that was it. That's all they provided to all the mice.
what
And
was their drugs?
I think it was some kind of opium or something,
Of
and that
course. Opium's
and
always a good one.
the mouse society kind of fucking deteriorated immediately, and a lot of people point to that study to say, yeah, if you give everyone their basic needs, society crumbles. And no, it's what happens when you have a very shallow view of what basic needs are. Those mice had absolutely no stimulation. They were bored out of their fucking mind, and all they had were drugs. Like that sound, I'ma be real, that sounds a lot like quarantine, if I'm being honest. Like everyone just has their recreational substances, and they are cooped up, and that leads to some cabin fever.
Yeah. And funny you say that. So like, because I'm quarantined, I'm working from home now, and I've had 3 jobs over the course of this like whole pandemic. But
Really?
um,
Wow.
yeah, that's a whole other story. Um, but since the start of January or this year, so the last 8, 9 days, whatever it is,
Right.
9 days, um, I have read 1,700 pages in 2 books, and I'm starting on my
Damn.
third.
Good
And
job.
that's yeah, I a lot of it's more like sci-fi, fantasy, and then I try to get into like science, just like stuff about vaccines, just because I hear a lot of people talking about they're putting metal into your body, which pretty sure is a whole other thing. But what I'm finding interesting about what you said about that cabin fever is I would never have read these books or any book for that matter any other time if there wasn't a pandemic.
Well, yeah, that book was a form of stimulation that the mice did not have. I will say that this pandemic was
one
different in that we have stimulation in our society. That cabin fever is in societies without stimulation. When you're stuck in a cabin, there's no books, there's nothing there. That's when cabin fever sets in. But our
no, yeah,
Yeah, but we have
and
access to the sum total of all of human knowledge, which is a fuckload of stimulation. So, yeah, that is a very fundamental difference between the cabin fever and uh, being in a situation where, wow, I can read the books that I didn't get to read.
well,
And a
yeah,
lot
no,
of
no, I was actually agreeing with you more about the fact that like this is a cabin fever. Like, yeah, I have access
right,
to all this knowledge and information, but what I'm saying is while these books were stimulating, I'm not reading them. Obviously, I want to read them and I want to have that experience and joy, but most of the like the reason that I'm reading so much is to escape the fact that I'm stuck in my house. Like that
yeah,
is my escape
yeah,
now. And those mice didn't have it, but if you think about like anyone can climb a mountain, right? They
right,
have the ability to walk up or ride up or X, Y, and Z, go see a mountain. Obviously, there's different factors that can stop them from doing it. But in this theory or fantasy that I'm coming up with, anyone has the ability to climb a mountain, but that
sure,
mountain takes time and steps. So if you give people the ability to look up anything and know any knowledge and do whatever they want, that's still a fucking mountain. They don't want
right,
to spend time doing that. Like humans
yeah,
are inherently lazy creatures. We want to find the fastest and best way to do it. So if I can sit down and read a book and be stimulated because the TV is filled with politics and people breaking into the Capitol, I'm going to do that instead because that's a lot easier for me to do. Like
right,
there's people that have ambition way higher than me that are like, I'm going to get 9 PhDs all online because I'm sitting at home. It's like, fuck that. Like, I don't want to go through that. But
right.
other
No, I
people
get that.
do. And that's why I think there's the issue, or that's more modern Darwinism of like, you have so much availability and so much knowledge that you can access. Like that's what scared me away from politics for so long. Is like I didn't want to spend the time to try to understand how we got to where we are because I was always scared that someone's gonna essentially outclass me with their knowledge in politics and me being like, well, I can't really argue that because I don't know.
Well, I have found a specific perspective that I've decided to subscribe to, and it is the perspective of class conflict. And it is more along the ideas of class, in that our society is built around those who have the power and ability to get things done, and the people who have much, much less power and ability to uh, interact. To impart change on the society that we live in. Some people have the ability to impart massive amounts of influence on our society, and some people have very little ability to influence society. And I think those people that have massive amounts of influence generally do it at the expense of the rest of society. And I consider that to be an unfair arrangement. And I would like to come up with a more ideal version of society that doesn't revolve around uh, having massive amounts of power, essentially.
Yeah. In that I really need to start like writing notes because I'm thinking of a lot of stuff as you're talking. But one thing that I want to say with that is there's a saying that's like obviously the squeaky wheel or the squeaky wheel gets the grease, right?
Yeah.
They're saying like the loudest person's going to be heard. But there's also the saying of like, well, the noisy brakes get replaced. So there's a certain level that you have to follow of like, yeah, I can keep shouting at this wall to fall down and it may fall down or it may fall on me.
Oh, I agree
So
completely. And that's kind of where the leftist idea of direct action comes from. On the left, there's a lot of ideas of the electoral system is not very viable. We don't have two, other than choosing which oppressor gets to oppress us, we don't really have that much of a say to meaningfully change the system which we live in. So it is up to us to start building the systems that are better, the systems that we would rather live in. And so a lot of leftists are very attached to mutual aid programs. We will give food to the homeless, will try to make life easier for those of whom life is very hard for. And that's a very core ideal of leftist praxis. Praxis is the idea of putting your words into practice. It's the German word, German for practice, praxis. It's how to take your ideas and make them a reality. And that's a very left idea.
yeah, and that's interesting because I don't want to get back into what we started with, but like to make your dream a reality, it's saying that you have access to whatever your dream wants to be. But what if your dream is hurting others? What if your dream of making money is taken away from other people?
Right.
And how do you how do you say that like my dream means more than anyone else's?
Well, it's that everyone chooses which fights to fight in. And I have my fights that I fight. You have your fights, and eventually, uh, some fights, some people are going to win their fights, some people are going to lose their fights. And the hope is that after all of the dust settles of all of the different fights, that society will be improved by it. That the people have chosen fights that help themselves instead of choosing fights that oppose their self interest. And that eventually it'll all work out with everyone looking at the world around them and deciding what they can do in order to make the world better. And that's honestly is where actually Marx's idea of the revolution comes from. Marx thought that the revolution was a natural occurrence, that the workers eventually would naturally realize that they are being oppressed by the employers and would decide on their own to rise up and have a revolution. Now, a lot of people disagree, but I don't know. I think it is. I don't know who's to say. I think it's entirely possible that it might happen. I
People are
don't.
gonna wait.
Sorry, I'm jumping.
No. That's just a like that's an I don't want to say an aggressive statement, but that last statement that you said that you believe that people will rise up to make that change.
It's that
'Cause I don't know if
people, well, it's that people will recognize the unfair situations with which they live and will decide that they want to change that situation and rise up against those who are preventing that change from happening.
okay. So how, and correct me if I'm wrong,
Right.
but how you're saying that, you could be saying, essentially you're arguing the fact that there is a right and a wrong of people rising up to make the change that they want to see. So let's just like say there's a top level of society and a bottom level. The bottom level wants to rise to the top. Well, what happens to the people at the top? And then
Well, what happened during the French Revolution? The people decided that they were fed up with the people in charge.
bourgeoisie.
Yeah. Well, the French Revolution was a bourgeoisie revolution. It was not a revolution against the bourgeoisie. It was a revolution of the bourgeoisie supplanting and replacing the monarchy. So
Okay.
so France was kind of split. So France was not an absolute, or like there was an absolute monarch for a while, but France was split up into lots of different nobilities. There were lords. It was a feudal society. There were lords that presided over their land, and the peasants lived on their land and worked the land. And then they kind of did some reforms, and that some of the peasants got started making money, and then they started making a lot of money, and then they were basically equal to the lords, but they still had to like curtsy to them. They still had to show deference, and they're like, no, I've worked hard, I've gotten to the point of being their equal. I'm not going to walk out of the way of the street, or I'm not going to step aside and let them walk by. Fuck them, fuck the nobility. And so the peasants who became the bourgeoisie, who sort of, and not the bourgeoisie is not all the peasants. A lot of the aristocracy decided to defect and to switch to the other side. They were like, "Oh yeah, the king is on the outs, and if I ally myself with the king now, I'm going to be on the outs too." So they kind of switched side, and they set up the ruling class of the replacement society, which came out to replace the monarchy.
Sounds a lot like the senator of Oklahoma, was it?
Maybe.
Right after the right, he stood up and was just like, "This is not what we wanted. I don't agree with Trump anymore." Biden won the election. I'm not like Mitch McConnell literally passed it to him first, right after the right when they reconvened at like 8:30, and that was his first statement was like, "I've backed you for a while, Mr. Trump, but not anymore."
Well,
It's weird.
it is weird. It's weird to look at how there is. Uh, I would argue that the big split is not necessarily between the left and the right anymore. Well, it's being framed as that, but I think of it more as a divide between those who accept and approve of the status quo and those who see the status quo as being a problem and would like to change it
Yeah.
with something else. And so there's the people on the left, like me, who oppose the status quo, who would like to change it with a better society. And then those people I would guess would be more represented by a candidate like Bernie Sanders. I now would consider myself a little bit past Bernie. I think of him as being the moderate version of a lot of the more far left ideas. And then on the right, there's the Trump people. The people who are like, no, the neoliberal establishments or the coastal elites are uh, importing the Mexicans and Muslims, and they're trying to destroy Western civilization. And so we need to have a strong man to take power on behalf of the true working class Americans. And make America great again. And that's sort of the divide, or that's sort of what I'm seeing. And that contrasts the more moderates of both sides who kind of are like, no, trust in the system will work out, it's all gonna be okay, just vote, and by voting, we're all gonna improve everything.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I see.
Yeah, no. I like your definition of those, of how people are essentially putting themselves in a box and saying like this is me and this is where I want to go, but most of them have that first level of understanding of what's right in their face, and no one talks about what the future is besides it's going to be good. Like, make America great again, okay, but what is great? Like, tell me
Exactly.
what that is, because I'm
Because
standing here
when
not
they
believing
say
it.
that, because when they say we're gonna make America great again, there's a lot of racists who hear that and think, "Fuck yeah, ethno state time," and like Trump doesn't do much to alienate those people. He sees them as strategic allies.
Well, yeah, because Trump is incredible at working the system and knowing where he needs to be to succeed. And like I said, right when the riots and everything started happening, my first thought was like, it's just going to be Trump's the reason that this happened. He's a scapegoat. It's like his son is flying under the radar, Rudy Giuliani is flying under the radar, and you have everyone's just like, the first lines you're seeing is it was his fault, so everyone else can still skate by. He
Right.
went too high. He went too far. We're making sure that everyone agrees with him, and making sure that he makes everyone happy, that it was like, fuck, I can't control this anymore, because like you just
He
said, like
tried to
you
make everyone happy and ended up making no one happy.
yeah, and you have like you said, you have racists coming forward and like, ethno state, let's go, without realizing that like the people that were succeeding in an ethno state are going to be the rich white people, and you living in a trailer park are going to be as poor as you are now. It's not going to be you as a slave master. You don't understand
Exactly.
that, like, it's not like, damn, I'm white, I succeed. It's like, I agree that those things happen. I'm not, I don't want to get into the whole race debacle that we could
Right.
do by that last statement that I just said, but
It's all
um
right.
yeah, it's funny that people bring it up of like, they they want things to change, and you, when you ask them what, they're just like,
Oh,
I don't know,
it's
I
like
just don't want to,
the meme
I
of
don't.
the dog, and it's like holding on to the ball, and it's like no give, only throw. Like
Yeah, they don't want to. They don't want the ball to be taken away, and then
right,
you throw it, and they're like so happy that it's thrown, not realizing that it's going to end. It's like I
exactly.
said, people want change, and they're just like, I just don't want to eat ramen every day. It's like, change your own life and figure out where you want it to go. And if you want to be in politics to make other people's lives better, then that's what you should do. If you're going into politics because you believe you can make your life better, well, you should probably look at politics right now, because it's not making anyone's lives better.
Well,
Like,
honestly, I think that might be why most people join politics. Politics is a game for people who seek power ultimately, and it's most effectively played by those who want to seek that power, and those who acquire that power tend to use that power in order to further their own interests. And even if you want to further, or even if you want to fix society and make it better, oftentimes, once you are given the power to fix society and make it better, oftentimes you're more concerned about perpetuating your own power and believe, oh, yes, by continuing and perpetuating my own power and my own influence, I am furthering the cause that I am claiming to believe. And oftentimes, they that's not what's happening. That people say that they're helping to improve the world, and then they achieve that power, and instead of using that power to influence change, that power changes them for the worse and turns them into exactly the same thing that they were fighting against prior.
yeah, well, in I think I slightly disagree because I think people get into politics because they want to see change. If you're getting into politics because you want to make money, you're going the bottom end route of what you can do to make money. There's so many
Right.
easier
Yeah.
ways to go. Like people go into politics because they want to see change and they're upset with how people are being treated. That's my belief. I could be wrong. Maybe people get into politics because they like power and control. That's other things that can happen, or maybe they just fell into it. But um, while they're there, I think they start to understand more and more that you can't make everyone happy, and not making everyone happy makes obviously someone upset, and that person
Right.
that's upset is going to be a hell of a lot louder than someone that's comfortable. You don't complain
Yeah,
when you're comfortable.
that's true.
So all we see is people complaining all the time, and it's great example. The 2020 all the way until January 6th, you had BLM protests and you had a riot at the Capitol because people wanted, I assume, Trump to be president, and they have a whole mix of things that they wanted. But
Oh,
you have let's
have
just
you seen Liberty Hangout? Have you ever heard of Liberty Hangout? They're
no. What is that?
they're on Twitter. It's by you remember the Kent State gun girl who brought her gun and became like this big figure. Well, they have been this whole thing. They've been freaking out, wanting Trump to declare himself a monarch, and they're like during the storming of the Capitol, they're like Trump needs to crown himself a monarch right now. What we need more than safety, or what we need more than freedom, is safety and security. We need to make our country stable, and they're they were like, we should crown Trump monarch, and that is absolutely ridiculous. I couldn't make satire better than that.
Yeah. It's really interesting that they're saying things that it doesn't sound like they know what they're actually saying, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like they're like, I want Trump to be monarch. It's like, all right, but what does that entail? Like you're saying,
Yeah.
it's like it's me being like, I want pizza from Italy. It's like, okay, but you realize that's like I have to fly to Italy to get it. I'm not going to get it in the United States, so that takes time and that takes money. It's like all of those things need to happen, and no one talks about those things happening.
Yeah, I'd say that that's a good point. My dog Cookie's freaking out right now. She wants attention.
Yeah, that my puppy's upstairs right now. He's very sassy.
I'm gonna be completely honest. I have a podcast that I need to get to. I think that this was a fantastically productive conversation. I really appreciate you coming on. I would love it if you did it again. I appreciate us working out that difficulty, and I fucking figure that the fuck out.
Yeah, I'd be down to do it again. Just let me know.
Yeah.
Anytime really.
Awesome. All right. Yeah. Thank you
man.
so much for coming. Have a fantastic. Have a fantastic day. I will.
Yeah. You
I'll
too.
catch you later.
All right. Have a good one, man.
You too. All right, so thank you so much for watching this video. I'm gonna have to do a lot of editing, but have a fantastic day. I will catch you guys later. Please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and do all the doobly doo things that that you're supposed to do. Bye.